education, which is what we're going to be talking about here today. And I want to thank Marty Glennon for introducing me and being our MC here today. I have a great team. I also have someone named Karen Keogh who's joined us. Let's give her a round of applause. She's the secretary to the governor. Mark Guilfoyle, I want to thank him as well, President Sinn Féin USA. Mary Lou McDonald has joined us here today. How about that? Talk about history making. What an extraordinary individual who has to be as tough as every Irish woman has to be. And she is truly a role model for all of us who are out there fighting on behalf of just causes. And I thank her for her leadership and inspiring people all across the world. So great to have her in our city. I know you'll be having other speakers as well, but I know there's also some very good friends in labor who are joining us before that we get started here. I know the James Connolly Irish American Labor Coalition, represented by my great friend John Murphy, is here, will be here this afternoon. And I realized that it was the labor movement that lifted my Irish grandparents who left as teenagers, left County Kerry, which is very rural, very poor, and they came to America. And Grandpa was at first a migrant farm worker in the wheat fields of South Dakota. They met in Chicago and worked as domestics, but all of a sudden the opportunity to become a steel worker in Buffalo, New York is what drew my grandparents to paradise. Now, if Bethlehem Steel had started in Florida, we might have had a little warmer experience growing up, but it wouldn't have been as much fun. Let's just get that out there. And they helped start the Irish Center in South Buffalo, and my grandfather brought the Gaelic American Athletic Association to North America from Buffalo, and he played Gaelic football. My dad played Gaelic football. That was part of my upbringing. But it was the labor movement, when my dad had that labor union card, that lifted them into the middle class. Grandpa and my dad and all his brothers worked making steel. Just like generations before them, they had dug the ditch that made the Erie Canal. So the Irish in America have paved their way through blood, sweat, hard work, and toil, but never giving up on that resounding optimism that a better day lies ahead. And that is what I bring to you today. My belief that better days do lie ahead, and we've come such a long, long way. Everyone knows the history, the oppression, the challenges, the loss of life. And you can't go to walk the streets of Dublin, as I was around the anniversary of the uprising in 2016, and to go down Connolly Street, and you can almost hear the voices, those brave, rebellious souls that still live within all of us, and Kilmainham Jail, and to hear the stories of the people who lost their lives executed the next day. All of that is steeped in our base of knowledge as Irish Americans as well. I want you to know that. It's part of who we are, the struggles, overcoming adversity. But truly it does make you stronger. It makes you able to handle the challenges of your time. And I was able to work with an individual named Daniel Patrick Moynihan. Anyone ever hear of him? I know he was involved in helping broker the Good Friday Agreement. I had a chance to talk to him before he passed away. But what he once said was, to fail to understand that life is going to knock you down is to fail to understand the Irishness of life. Can anybody relate to that saying? Indeed, we can. And as a people, we stood up. And I would say that it is now upon all of us, whether you're Irish Americans, Irish New Yorkers, or direct from the Emerald Isle yourselves, that we must uphold this peace, this unique time in our history where people could come together and put aside their differences and say that we want the violence to end, that there is a way to have a shared governance structure, that we can overcome the shackles of history. And that's what we honor here today. And I simply say this: let what happened with the Good Friday agreements and its endurance over the last 26 years give hope to other parts of our world that are in conflict today. Let that be an inspiration to those who are out there fighting to protect their citizens, their homeland, which is, we cherish our homeland with a depth of love that knows no boundaries. That is the Irishness in me, for sure. But let us go forth and say it can be done. Don't give up on peace. Because as long as there's good-willing people, hardworking people, people who care not just about what we're going through today, but the world we're going to leave to our children and grandchildren, that should be the motivating force to protect this peace, once considered too fragile to even endure, but yes, a quarter of a century later it has. And I hope that the rest of the world pays attention, that where there's a will, and there's a lot of bold Irish people involved who can chart the path and give you the lessons and work with you, that peace is possible throughout the great earth. And for that, I thank all of you for helping me understand my history, my resilience, the toughness that's required. I have been called an iron fist and a velvet glove, and that certainly comes back from growing up in a big, rambunctious Irish Catholic family. So anyone who wants to take me on, I say bring it on. Thank you very much, everybody.
How's that for kicking off Women's History Month? So welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the esteemed Great Hall at Cooper Union. I am Marty Glennon, your MC for the program. As I just mentioned, today is March 1st, the first day of Irish American Heritage Month, and the first day of Women's History Month. How fitting that we had the governor of New York, the first woman governor of New York, welcome us. And we're going to also hear from the first woman president of Sinn Féin, and quite possibly the first Taoiseach of Ireland, Mary Lou McDonald. Standing in this room and at this very podium, I am constantly reminded of the luminaries that stood here before me. Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, James Connolly. Each of them who have spoken from this very podium. This great hall has witnessed many significant moments, and today marks the fourth event hosted by Irish America on the Irish issue, and it will undoubtedly be one of the most historic. Before we delve into today's summit, I wanted to extend a heartfelt thank you to each one of you for your unwavering interest, commitment to the cause of Ireland. Without the collective voice of Irish America and the support of the organizations that are sponsoring this event, landmark achievements like the Good Friday Agreement and the pathway to Irish unity could never happen. Today, as we convene on another chapter of Irish history, let us recommit ourselves to the cause of Ireland and to all the people of Ireland. Reflecting on the last gathering here in April, we discussed the history of the Good Friday Agreement, and we heard perspectives from President Bill Clinton and Jerry Adams. Both of them agreed that the Good Friday Agreement was a historic roadmap rather than a definitive answer to Irish unity. Today, we are going to read that map, and we're going to get to our destination of Irish unity. And as I said, today is first day of March, Women's History Month. So in addition to this new chapter in Irish history, today we add a new chapter to women's history. We heard from the governor, and we are going to hear from the president of Sinn Féin, Mary Lou McDonald, who will be in this great hall for the first time. Since taking office as president of Sinn Féin in 2018, Mary Lou McDonald and Sinn Féin has seen an exponential growth in the elected seats of Sinn Féin representatives in both the north and south of Ireland. With that growth came the expansion of dialogue around Irish unity, reflecting on the progress that has been made. We only need to look back at the most recent of events. Michelle O'Neill, Vice President of Sinn Féin, is now serving as the First Minister in Stormont. That is how you measure how far you've come in 25 years. Since Mary Lou McDonald and Michelle O'Neill have taken office, the message has been consistent and clear. Ireland's future should be determined by the people of Ireland. The governance of Ireland shall be by the elected representative of the Irish people of Ireland, both North and South. And those elected individuals shall serve the interests of the people that elected them, all the people of Ireland. I also want to give special thanks to our sponsoring organizations, the Ancient Order of Hibernians, the Brehon Law Societies of New York City, Nassau, and Suffolk, the Irish Unity Conference, the James Connolly Irish American Labor Coalition, the Ladies' Ancient Order of Hibernians, Friends of Sinn Féin, and the Friendly Sons of Long Island. Many of you might not know this, but several of those organizations testified before a Congressional Foreign Affairs Committee in 1918 at a hearing called the Irish Question. The question was the right of Ireland to freedom, independence, and self-determination. These organizations were instrumental then, as they are today. Today, we're going to hear from two very distinguished panels. The first is remarkably diverse and will address their hopes for a new and united Ireland. The second panel will answer the question and provide us with a pathway to unity. We will also have a fireside chat of sorts, where the participants will have a conversation and share their thoughts for the pathway to unity. We will hear from 2 U.S. elected officials discuss what they see as America's continuing role in achieving an Irish unity referendum. Throughout the day, you will hear from representatives of the sponsoring organizations on why this summit is important to them. We are also fortunate in that we will be entertained by world-renowned musicians, the New York Ceilidh Band. And if you clap for that, it's free of charge. To paraphrase W.B. Yeats, after 1916, everything changed. It changed utterly. And a terrible beauty was born. That terrible beauty is the rising of the moon. Today, we gather to unequivocally answer the Irish question that was asked over 100 years ago. There'll be no more waiting, no more interference from British rule, and no more procrastination from the Irish government. The Irish people will decide the future throughout a referendum on Irish unity. However, while the removal of the border may physically unite Ireland, the work to unify all the people of Ireland, the land we love, will take longer. To win the hearts and minds of the people of Ireland, you need to be empathetic. You need to listen to their differences, regardless of whether those differences are political, religious, cultural, or anything else. It is incumbent that we work towards a common ground, as we need to change what was considered commonplace for generations for many people in Ireland. We are seeking a new and better design for Ireland, an inclusive Ireland. So listen carefully to our distinguished guests and representatives, sponsoring organizations, and ask yourself, how can I get more involved? The time has arrived. The time is now. It is time for the people of Ireland to decide their future and to decide it democratically. So I'm going to ask you all to get comfortable, relax, and enjoy today's historic event. And before we do, I just want to take a moment, and again, Women's History Month, I'm reminded of the coined phrase, well-behaved women rarely make history. So before we go any further with today's summit, I want to acknowledge the one person that's brought us all here today. Because of her, there's no more than 1 degree of separation between all of us. Although she is not physically present in this room, she has touched each of us in her own incredibly unique way. She is the reason the U.S. has been so engaged in answering that Irish question. Rita O'Hare dedicated her life to one thing, Irish unity. I'm sure all of us can share a story about Rita, and I, for one, still think of her and miss her every day. For someone of such small stature, she was a giant in the fight for Ireland's independence. So I would like to take this opportunity to dedicate this summit to the work and memory of Rita O'Hare. And think about it, if each of us could carry only a fraction of the dedication and commitment that Rita brought to the cause, we'd be that much closer to her dream and seeing it come to fruition. So please remember her family and friends this weekend. Sunday is the 1-year anniversary of her passing. Do we have a video?
We loved Rita. We loved Rita for who she was, for the life she led, for the example she set, for the inspiration she gave us, for all the burdens she bore, and for all the challenges she overcame. We loved her for the hard roads she travelled to keep alive the dream of the Republic, the vision to which she dedicated her beautiful life, her life of resilience and hope. Perhaps her greatest strength was her ability not only to make friendships, but to keep them too. This was most evident in her success as Sinn Féin's representative to the United States, particularly during the peace process and in the time leading up to the historic Good Friday Agreement. In America, in those pivotal times, she knocked on every door, left no stone unturned. She was relentless because she believed that peace could lead us to a new, united Ireland, because she believed in the leadership of Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness, because she believed in the capacity of the Irish people to see beyond the trenches of the past, to seize the opportunity to build a better future. Rita would have given anything to see the day when we end partition. Now she relies on us to carry on, to grasp the moment, to seize the purpose of a generation, to make it happen. We will move heaven and earth to finish that noble journey. I want you to know that we've got this, Rita. We will not let you down. Until we meet again, sleep well, our leader, our comrade, our dearest friend.
She was some woman for one woman. So we're going to get started with our program now. I'm going to bring to the stage Mark Guilfoyle, the president of Friends of Sinn Féin.
Good afternoon. How does it feel to be part of making history? Well, that's exactly what we are doing here today. And make no mistake, Irish America has a vital part to play in making history on the island of Ireland. It is fitting that we meet here in the Cooper Union. 164 years ago, in February of 1860, Abraham Lincoln came to the Cooper Union to make a speech that propelled him to the nomination of the Republican Party 3 months later and to the presidency 9 months later. Lincoln delivered a tour de force, showing how a majority of the signers of our Constitution were opposed to slavery in the territories. Even at that early date, Lincoln saw that the United States must aspire to be a country of equals. Now, I will not compare directly our keynote speaker to Abraham Lincoln. And for the record, while she's been here in New York City, she's not attended any plays. But consider how we are all engaged in building an Ireland of equals. Together, we can build a new Ireland, a home for all, a united, peaceful, and prosperous Ireland. Lincoln had the exact same vision for America in 1860. Please also consider that the reunification of Ireland is no longer a mere aspiration. It is a doable project, and it is within touching distance if we all roll up our sleeves and set about the work that we are undertaking here today. Hard work for sure, but the reward will make history. Achieving a united Ireland will take leadership, and our keynote speaker is the kind of skilled and passionate leader who can help us get across the goal line. Mary Lou McDonald is a person who is versed in the history of Ireland, who understands the need to accommodate the varied cultural traditions in Ireland, who is gifted with a generous spirit and love for the people of Ireland, and who possesses a singular drive to make Irish unity a reality. When commenting on Lincoln, the poet Carl Sandburg observed that it is not often that a leader appears in history who is both steel and velvet, and who is as hard as rock and soft as drifting fog. Mary Lou McDonald has both the strength of her all-Ireland convictions as well as a deft human touch and generosity of spirit. We need leaders like Mary Lou McDonald who are both steel and velvet if we are to succeed in building an Ireland of equals. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mary Lou McDonald.
Thank you very much. Gurmila Maigwiv. Hello, New York. Hello, America. It's great to be here. A chóirde is mór an ordum a bheith iniu chun tawachí na héireann a phlé. Ní mór dúin na céimena deireadh an tursca éire aontaithe a thógáil le chéile. Friends, to address you in the Cooper Hall, a hall that bore witness to the makers of American history, is a very great honour for me. To stand at this lectern, at which Abraham Lincoln asserted the right of Congress to end slavery, in a place whose walls echo with the words of US presidents, world leaders, and Irish Republicans. They echo with the words of the great revolutionary and Easter 1916 leader James Connolly, who spoke here in September 1902 and described himself as an Irish agitator. Well, I stand here as an Irish agitator, following in Connolly's footsteps. Dedicated to the cause of change, unity, prosperity, and Irish nationhood. I want to thank the organisers of today's forum for inviting me to speak. The video tribute to Rita O'Hare was very moving. Rita was, as you know, a force of nature, a leader, a patriot who loved Ireland and our people. She was our friend. We love her dearly. We miss her desperately. And so today I want to dedicate my remarks to her, to Rita. My friends, we meet as we cross the threshold to springtime, a time that symbolises renewal, hope, and the human instinct to forever begin. A time that symbolises the light of change, illuminating the way forward. All of these instincts, renewal, hope, and change, are at the very heart of nation building and at the very heart of the exciting journey to reunification and the achievement of a new Ireland in our time. A journey that ends with the realisation of full nationhood. Ireland, united and free, finally taking our rightful place amongst the nations of the world. This is a journey that the United States has walked with Ireland for generations. The bonds that tie our two countries together are not only those of friendship, but they are also bonds of family. Bonds forged by the agonies of famine, the destitution of the coffin ship, of emigrants forced across the Atlantic in search of work and opportunity and a better life in a new world, in the land of the free. These are the roots of Irish America. The connection between Ireland and the US is a story of challenge, perseverance, hope, of endurance and success. The US has been sanctuary for Irish people, and those Irish who came here helped to build this nation and have made defining contributions to American society across literature and politics, business, arts, music and sport. The US kept faith with Ireland and played a central role in our national voyage, spanning the struggle for independence, the pain of conflict, an emerging peace process that defied all of the odds, right through to the achievement of the historic Good Friday Agreement 26 years ago. There would have been no Irish peace process without the United States. There would have been no Irish peace process without people like you, and we thank you for your work. When Brexit threatened Irish interests and our peace agreement, the US stood up and stood by Ireland. That's what friends do. That's what family does. And so today, I ask that you walk with us now on this length of the journey in common cause for peace, for reconciliation, for progress and prosperity, for unity. You see, seismic generational change is underway in Ireland and the old certainties are collapsing. On February the 3rd, Michelle O'Neill, Las Uachtarán Sinn Féin, a Republican woman from County Tyrone, took up the office of First Minister. She pledged to be a First Minister for all, and every day she shows that she means it. For the first time ever, we have a nationalist leading government in the north of Ireland, in a state designed and engineered to ensure that this could never happen. A state designed and engineered to ensure a permanent unionist majority. That is now gone. A Republican Party, Sinn Féin, leads the executive and local government. Combined nationalism outpolls combined unionism. And let me be clear, this isn't to sound a bell of triumphalism, far from it. It's merely to capture the depth of the change that's underway. A new chapter of Irish history is being written. Change is real and happening in real time. It must be acknowledged, understood, and grasped bravely with both hands. The great beauty of the peace that we have built together is that we can hold very differing, opposing views about the future, about constitutional change, and still work together to make life better for workers and families in the here and now. The genius of the Good Friday Agreement is that it is a set of rules, principles, and institutions to facilitate power sharing, to protect citizens' rights, and to manage political difference. It provides, as you know, for referendums and obligates both the British and Irish governments to act on the outcome, placing the constitutional future of Ireland in the hands of the people, north and south, to be decided on that most sacred democratic principle: one person, one vote. In the polling station, everybody will be equal. Everybody will have their say. And the outcome is decided by simple democratic majority. Those are the rules. As an Irish Republican, I advocate for a united Ireland. As an Irish Republican, I see every person who argues for the preservation of the union with Britain, every person of British identity, as an equal. No caveats, no exceptions, all equal. And to those citizens of a unionist or British tradition, I say, we seek a future of partnership, equality, and progress with you. The new Ireland we seek belongs every bit as much to the families of the Shankill as the families of the Falls, every bit as much to the families of Ballymena as it does to the families of Ballymun. So imagine for a moment a new future free from a self-serving government in London. Imagine all of us truly controlling our shared destiny. One Ireland, the orange and green reconciled. One nation, all communities moving forward to build our future together. That is our dream. As Maya Angelou wrote, the great Maya Angelou wrote, history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. In the past, we have hurt each other. There is an enormous power in stepping forward with an open heart and an open hand of friendship to say sorry to each other. We ask nobody to move on, but we can move forward. We can move forward together. The partition of Ireland has failed from the start. It's failed all of us. There has been a profound cost to partition, politically, socially, and economically. The policies implemented by the Tory government over the last decade have spelt disaster for the North, for nationalists and unionists alike. Tory austerity has ravaged vital public services and it's damaged the lives of workers and families. Tory governments in London never cared for the people of the north of Ireland. Indeed, unionist leader Edward Carson called it in 1921. Here's what he said: "What a fool I was. I was only a puppet, and so was Ulster, and so was Ireland, in the political game that was to get the Conservative Party into government." Oh, those words ring so true today. Friends, both the Irish and British governments must face up to the reality that a momentous current of change is pulsing throughout Ireland. So instead of driving divisive, insulting legacy legislation, the British government must play a constructive role in moving society forward. And the Irish government must lead. The latest infrastructural funding commitments from Dublin are welcome, but we need now to get serious about preparing for Irish unity and constitutional change. It is now imperative that the Irish government establish a citizens' assembly to plan for Irish unity, an assembly where everyone is welcome, everyone is included, and everyone gets to share their ideas, their hopes, and their ambitions. This week, Ireland's Future, a civic society organisation, has published proposals for preparing for a unity referendum by the end of this decade. I believe that that is the timeline. I believe that that is achievable. You see, more and more people are now seriously considering the future and the shape of constitutional change. And friends, the reunification of Ireland is firmly on the table. In the south, this appetite for change has already seen the political landscape transformed. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, the parties that have passed power between themselves for over a century, no longer have it all their own way. You see, there's a new kid on the block. Sinn Féin leads the opposition. We do so with vision, determination, and energy, and we're not stopping there. We want to be in government. We want to lead government. A general election is approaching, and our goal remains the formation of a government of change that puts reunification at the very heart of our agenda. A government that will drive to take Ireland's economic strength and dynamism to the next level, drive innovation, invest in higher education, research and development, and deliver a plan for the achievement of energy independence, harnessing Ireland's huge renewable resources. A government that will transform our health service. A government that builds homes. One of the greatest duties of political leaders is to build nations in which our young people can prosper. In our young people, we have everything we need to chart a successful future for our country. And I want to speak directly to them today. There is no limit to your talent, ambition, and determination. You work hard, and you can change Ireland and the world if you're given your chance. Willie Loman, the central character in Arthur Miller's play The Death of a Salesman, was certainly not a young man. But his painful lament of feeling kind of temporary about himself might well be the lament of so many of you today. Unable to find an affordable home, living to work instead of working to live, and too many of you concluding that to get a chance, to get the big opportunity, you must leave Ireland. The truth is that you have been failed by successive governments, particularly in the area of housing. So we have a very strong economy, but yours is the first generation that will be worse off than your parents. It's time to change that. To renew the promise to you that you can step out into the world with confidence and pride, that you can realize the dream of home ownership, that you can build a good life and a prosperous future in Ireland. And I want to make that promise real for you. So to all of you who've come to the US or Canada, who have ventured down under to Australia or New Zealand in search of a better life, to learn and to grow, I want to tell you that we are very, very proud of you. Proud of everything you achieve and experience. And when you're ready, we want you to come home. We need you to come home. We want you to pursue happiness and a home and to build a new, united, prosperous Ireland together with us. And I make this pledge to you that a new government, a government of change, will build the houses you need, will deliver the services and opportunities that you deserve, and create that pathway home for you when you are ready to come back to us. Friends, the work of peace and nation building in Ireland can't help happen in splendid isolation. We have known the brutality of colonialism and dispossession and the pain of conflict. We know the true value of peace. Today, the beleaguered, besieged, impoverished refugee population of Gaza endure unimaginable suffering. This vicious criminal onslaught must stop now. Those funding these atrocities must stop now. All hostages must be released. We need an immediate ceasefire. We need that now. We need the renewal of a peace process based on international law, based on the two-state solution, with the aim of achieving self-determination and freedom for the Palestinians and a secure Israel. Because you see, even in the darkest of times, we must seek the light. We must bring the light. The success of the Good Friday Agreement teaches us that no conflict is intractable. Peace is a question of will, and peace must now be the united will of the international community. Friends, the work of nation building, of uniting Ireland, is about creating a home where everyone belongs. A nation is a collection of generations walking their length of the same journey. Today, our generation holds the compass and the map. The people of Ireland get to decide the direction we take, not only for ourselves, but for everyone who comes after us. The people of Ireland get to shape the future. It is an awesome responsibility. And it's one that must inspire, motivate, and excite us. Change is happening now, and we cannot let it pass by. For Ireland, the opportunity is just too great. The saying goes that society grows great when people plant trees in whose shade they will never sit. But I believe with every conversation, every debate, every initiative, we plant the seeds of a united Ireland that we will see in our lifetime. In the end, nation building is the task of dreamers, of change makers, of future shapers. And just imagine the dream comes to pass. Imagine in 10 years, Ireland is united. History then will forever record that we were the generation that made Irish unity a reality. That we were the generation that made history. I believe that we must achieve it. I believe that we can achieve it. I believe that we will achieve it. Together and in our time, we will realize the dream. We will finish the journey. We will shape the future. A new, united Ireland and a nation home for everyone. Gurimila, Mila Mahagwiv, Galer.
That's only Act One for Mary Lou. So I'd like you to please put your hands together and welcome the President of the Ancient Order of Hibernians, one of the groups that was there in 1918 testifying before Congress, Danny O'Connell.
Boy, I got to tell you, listening to Mary Lou, I know Rita would be proud. So what a way to start today's event. I'm so honored to serve as the national president for the Ancient Order of Hibernians in America. We were founded in 1836 as basically the first Irish immigrant organization in America. The new Irish American organization had an unwavering commitment to a free Ireland, free from British tyranny and control, which is all they knew at that time. On May 3rd, 1921, partition happened in Ireland. At that time, the AOH immediately adjusted with a constitutional mandate to aid and advance, by all legitimate means, the aspirations and endeavors of the Irish people for a complete and absolute independence, promoting peace and unity for all of Ireland. That became part of our Constitution, part of our preamble, complete and absolute independence for all of Ireland. It's right there, first thing in our documents. Today, thank you. Today, the Ancient Order of Hibernians in America is the largest Irish Catholic organization, and in fact, the largest Irish organization outside of Ireland. The AOH is the only Irish organization to have members in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. The AOH is a nonpartisan organization. We do not support any political party or any political candidate. It is equally important to understand that we do not oppose any political party or any political candidate. The AOH wholeheartedly support the Good Friday Agreement. The reality is, to have a successful new and united Ireland, we must work with all political parties in Ireland, all political parties in Northern Ireland, all political parties in the United States, and all political parties in the UK. This is no small task, and it's definitely not an easy task, but it is necessary if we are to have a new Ireland of equals. The Good Friday Agreement calls for a border poll if at any time it appears likely that the majority of those voting would express a wish that Northern Ireland should cease to be part of the UK and be part of a united Ireland. Now is the time to call the border poll because the majority of those voting are in favor of a new Ireland free from British rule. The Ancient Order of Hibernians in America calls on all Irish American organizations, and in fact all Irish Americans, to stand with us and call for this complete and absolute independence of Ireland. The criteria has been met. It is time for the United States to call on the British government, one of our allies, to direct the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland to set the date for a border poll. Now is the time for the Secretary of State to plan and prepare for the border poll. For the first time in history, all major political parties have come together. All major political parties in the north of Ireland has come together to agree on one major issue. All the major parties agree that the Boris Johnson legacy bill is an abomination. Ian Paisley Jr. even sent me an email thanking the AOH for being on the right side of the legacy bill. This is history in the making. We must continue our support for justice of all victims, regardless of their personal politics. We must continue to support the Irish government in their legal battle against the UK legacy justice bill. Around the country, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to meet all kinds of political leaders from Ireland. It's critical that at every opportunity we thank them for taking the British government to court over the Legacy Justice Bill. I'm proud, so proud of what the AOH has done. 4 days after the bill was announced in the Queen's speech, Martin Galvin had a webinar established, and it was the first attack on the bill, which has been now, I think, attacked by everybody in the world except for the Tory party. The AOH is committed to continue our work in Northern Ireland. Over the last 2 years, we distributed over $300,000 to organizations in Northern Ireland committed to the Good Friday Agreement. Justice organizations, cross-community and cross-border organizations, culture and heritage organizations, organizations committed to addressing and remembering the past. Our goal in helping these organizations is to prepare to build for a new Ireland for tomorrow. If we are to be successful, we must all work with the same positivity demonstrated by the new First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, has taken in her first 2 weeks of office. And we must live and work every day with an attitude of gratitude and make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. All right, we're going to switch over now. We're going to do a little bit of a fireside chat of sorts. I'd like to introduce Professor Brendan O'Leary from the University of Pennsylvania and an author and journalist, Megan Stack. Lincoln's watching over us.
Nice to see you.
Likewise.
So, Brendan, you're here today because you literally wrote the book on the United Ireland. It's right here. Let me ask you, just to kind of get things started a bit, are we living in the last days of partition?
Very, very probably.
Interesting. Very interesting. So why don't we start, tell me a little bit about your background, where you grew up in Ireland, how that sort of formed your understanding of politics across the island, and what you brought to this study when you began getting into it.
Well, thanks for the question. I was born in Cork in 1958, and my parents moved myself and my sister to northern Nigeria in 1959. So we went from the Nigerian Civil War to Northern Ireland in 1968. My parents had impeccable timing. Location. And my father then chose his next place of work to be the Sudan. So I grew up, in effect, in 3 north-south conflicts in 3 different parts of the world. And I grew up thinking that ethnic conflict was normal. My father saw 3 of his laboratories destroyed in ethnic civil wars, and he told me before he died that he thought what I did, trying to promote power sharing in deeply divided places, was much more important than the work he and other development specialists engaged in. So I'm Irish from both parts of the north and from both parts of the south. I'm a political scientist. I care about trying to achieve diversity.
Now, when you remember your childhood and, coming in and out of Ireland, at that time, what was the view of the possibility of ending partition? What was the idea of a united Ireland? How did it figure in the national imagination? Did your parents talk about it? Where was the conversation at that point?
My parents both believed in the merits of Irish unification. Neither of them expected.
Right.
When we went,
Mike.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
I won't let it near my pocket again. Okay. Would you care to repeat the question?
Well, we were talking about how the idea or possibility of a united Ireland was viewed at the time of your upbringing by your parents, and, it's just interesting to reflect on how much things have changed.
Neither of my parents expected a united Ireland, and when we went to the north, we got a very strong sense of the deep antipathy to unification among the Unionist and British population. Mm-hmm. Most of the people whom I would call cultural Catholics had no expectation of unification in the late 60s and early 70s. What they did have was some hope of improvement in their rights.
Right. And how did you first begin studying this question, which I feel, from what I know of you and your career, has come to really define your career in many ways? I mean, I feel like this is really at the moment at the very center of your work. How did you get into it?
Well, I first of all ran away from it.
Okay.
I ran away to England, where I pursued my university career, and then I came back to it, and I was fortunate enough to be hired indirectly to advise the British Labour Party on Northern Ireland in the late 1980s. So I was one of the advisors to Kevin McNamara, MP, and later to Marjorie Molan, who played a key role in the making of the Good Friday Agreement. Yeah. I helped write her speeches, and I helped shape her thinking, at least a little bit, I think. So I got that kind of direct involvement. And subsequently, I was involved in support for the Morrison delegation, which was led by Congressman Bruce Morrison and the late Chuck Feeney, and others in trying to bring peace to Ireland in the early 1990s.
And when did you first begin to study it as an academic question?
Roughly from the time of the making of the Anglo-Irish Agreement of 1987. 1985. It gets effectively implemented in 87. I'm deeply interested in this British-Irish experiment, which I hope will work. And I get deeply involved both in analysing whether it will work and in helping to promote it.
So let's get into it. How do you see things? Let's first say, in your ideal world, if you could move all the pieces as you would have them moved, how do you see things moving forward at this point towards a united Ireland?
I think it would be very helpful if we have a period of effective implementation of the Good Friday Agreement, North and South. We have a stable, effective executive in the North, an assembly that works, North-South institutions that work, and we get a restoration of British and Irish cooperation, preferably under a new British government. Some people argue, I think mistakenly, that it requires a failure of the institutions in the North to prompt Irish unification. I'm not of that view. I think that could happen, but I'm of the view that if the Good Friday Agreement institutions work well, that will ease the path and build the trust required to make a united Ireland work better.
But we've just come out of a period when it seemed for quite some months that the situation in the North was frozen, and that in fact it wasn't clear how we were going to move forward. How did that affect public opinion? How did that sort of change the equation and how people were maybe thinking about constitutional change?
Well, we've seen three big things happening at once. One is the confirmation of very slow electoral change. In the North, Northern nationalists won the local government elections of last year. That was the first time the combined vote of all Northern nationalists exceeded that of Ulster Unionists. And for the first time, Unionists got slightly less than 40% of the vote. a slow electoral transformation. At the same time, we saw significant demographic change confirmed. In 2021, it was the first time that Catholic believers outnumbered Protestant believers in the North. The actual numbers of cultural Catholics as opposed to cultural Protestants, you have to count the atheists in both blocs. We don't know their exact number, but I would say now, given the level of change that will have occurred since the census occurred, there is probably now a cultural Catholic majority emerging in the electorate. That has very deep long-run implications. Not everybody agrees on that, by the way. There's two schools of thought. One school of thought thinks as I do. The other school of thought thinks that the northern populations are going to stabilize into three blocks: nationalists, unionists, and others, and that will be a fixture. I don't think so. I think the dynamic of change will continue and that the Northern Nationalist Bloc will continue to rise. I also think that the others will probably split according to their traditional community of origin at the key moment when a referendum occurs. So those are two big changes that have been happening against the background of all the conflict we've seen. And the third is, of course, Brexit. Brexit was imposed against the wishes of a majority in Northern Ireland. The Democratic Unionist Party excelled itself in policy folly. It chose not only to pursue a policy against the electorate in Northern Ireland, but it chose to trust Boris Johnson. Yeah. It is said that Arlene Foster was the only woman ever to have believed Boris Johnson's lies. I'm not sure that that's true, but the DUP accepted the word of Boris Johnson, and of course that has meant that we are confronted with the details of the protocol. And what the protocol does effectively is to create special trading arrangements for Northern Ireland, and vitally to preserve the fundamental achievements of the Good Friday Agreement, including the non-diminution of all the rights contained in the original Good Friday Agreement. Now, it's my view that the conjunction of all those changes over time is going to have decisive consequences, because liberal Protestants are a significant fraction of the northern population. They favour the European Union. They've been ripped out of the European Union against their will. If they want to get back into Europe, they have to contemplate Irish unity as the only fast route towards that objective. And it may not be all that fast, but that's the route they have to go on. So I think that the working out of electoral change, demographic change, and the outworkings of Brexit have set up a dynamic in which Irish unification becomes really attractive, in particular because the trajectory of the United Kingdom henceforward doesn't look good. They've got stagnant economic growth. They're deeply divided internally. The two biggest parties run from the necessity of deepening their relationship with Europe. And at the same time, the Republic of Ireland is a dramatic economic success story. Yes, of course, it has fundamental problems attached to housing and other profound inequalities. But by comparison with Great Britain, it is an astonishing success story. And what I expect to happen over time is that the population in the north who are doubtful about unification, particularly cultural Catholics in the north, they will see over time that if this is the choice, continuing the link with Great Britain or going for unification, unification will look like the rational strategic bet.
Yes. I guess what I was getting at is that with the extended DUP boycott of Stormont and the sort of sense that politics in Northern Ireland were somehow dysfunctioning, I wonder how that affected opinion and sort of, if people were starting to rethink what kind of a system they wanted to live in or what kind of a governance they wanted to have, and if that in turn affects feelings towards the idea of unification.
I think it produced a deep cynicism among the population in Northern Ireland and a loss of faith that power sharing could actually function and work. That did not work to the advantage of unionists, and I expect the Democratic Unionist Party to pay a price in the next Westminster elections. So what we've seen in effect, I think, is a strategic retreat by the Democratic Unionist Party. They've gone back into the Assembly. They've accepted Michelle O'Neill as First Minister of Northern Ireland, and they have done so because they believe that that is a better strategic option than deliberately making Northern Ireland not work. That wasn't taking the North in a direction that was in their interests. So we should treat this decision of theirs to go back into Stormont as a welcome recognition that that is the best way that they can keep the Union, because the other strategy wasn't going to work.
So we talk a lot in this discussion about what people want, what people think. We're obviously drawing that, we're inferring it from different polls and different measurements of public opinion. You are deeply involved in that. I think anyone who's studied this issue even a little bit has run very quickly into the different numbers. You see so many percentages when it comes to the public opinion sympathies and where they are. So can you tell us a little bit? You told me that, I know, of course, you think your numbers are the best, the most accurate. They're also, in some ways they're the lowest, right, in terms of favorability of United Ireland. Can you tell us a little bit about why you have so much confidence in your research, in your opinion research, how it's done, and what are you finding? What are you finding now?
So before I answer that very good question, may I say that people should focus, first of all, on election results above opinion polls and surveys, because those are decisive occasions in which as many citizens as want can vote. So that's a priority. Now, when it comes to opinion polls, internet-based opinion polls show stronger levels of support for Irish unification right now than the kind of surveys conducted by my colleagues and myself. I'm part of a group called ARINS, Analysing and Researching Ireland North and South. And I think the reasons for the differences in our results are straightforward. They have a panel of regular people whom they poll through the internet. They take a relatively large panel and they make sure that that panel's preferences are very close to recent elections. And that keeps them close to predicting preferences right for elections. But what they're not picking up are the disengaged, the non-engaged, the retired, those who are not on the internet, and so on. Our surveys, by contrast, involve a stratified probability sample of the whole population. The survey companies go to people's homes, they take an iPad, they give it to the individual, they fill in their responses anonymously. There's no question of their identity being revealed. They can have full confidence in the process. And as a result, I think we're picking up a lot more of the don't knows and don't cares. And roughly speaking, I would say the population in the north right now is 30% in favour of a united Ireland, 50% in favour of maintaining the union, 5% wouldn't vote, don't care, and the rest, very significantly and very important for the future ahead, are the don't knows.
Right, so tell us about the don't knows. I know, and the what you call the wobblies. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so the don't knows are those who, when asked a really important question, do you want to be part of the United Kingdom or do you want to be part of the Republic of Ireland, say don't know. Imagine that. You don't know what country you want to be part of. Right? That's fundamentally interesting, to be doubtful about that. Most of those are cultural Catholics. There is a significant number of Protestants among them as well, but most of them are cultural Catholics. The wobblies I define as those who have given in response to some polls the answer that they have changed their mind on whether they want to be part of the Union or a united Ireland several times. So I call them the wobblies because they move from each position. Who are the wobblies? They're mostly women. Now, that does not mean that I want to underestimate their intelligence. By and large, men are dogmatic. Women are more flexible and take longer to make decisions and are more likely to be doubtful, don't know, in response to a profound question. So one of the things that advocates of Irish unification will have to do is to focus particularly on persuading women that a united Ireland is a better option for them than remaining in the United Kingdom. But they'll have to focus on that whole don't know category with special care.
Now, I have an impression, you can tell if this is accurate or not. I have the impression just from talking to people and reading, I feel like I often will hear people say, I used to be in favor of staying in the Union, but now I've rethought it and I'm more open to a united Ireland. I really haven't heard anyone moving in the other direction, which has given me the impression that there's more flow toward united Ireland. Is that accurate?
I think it's broadly accurate. I think a lot of cultural Catholics in 2000 would have accepted the Good Friday Agreement potentially as a final settlement in which the North would have remained part of the United Kingdom with successful power-sharing institutions inside the North and North-South. But the combination of Unionist refusal to work the institutions with good faith, the combination of that with truly incompetent Conservative government, particularly since 2010, I think all that has destabilized cultural Catholic contentment with a reformed union. And that's why those who support unification, those who advocate for it, can look forward with some genuinely well-founded optimism in the period ahead.
Tell me about the Catholics who do want to stay in the Union. Who are they, and what is the reasoning that they have?
We know that they generally tend to be not particularly well-off Catholics. We know that they are those who are not engaged in politics, and for that reason, they're the kind of people who would be slowest to adjust their preferences. We know something about their class and educational background, but it's not sufficiently decisive that I could give clear advice to strategists on what to do. My suggestion for those who favor unification is the most important thing, North and South, is to develop adequate preparation of a plan for what a united Ireland would look like. Because one of the things we can say with complete confidence is that the Brexit referendums had decisive influence on the opinion of people in the North and in the South. What did they see? A referendum in which the choice was remain in the European Union, which was pretty clear, and leave, which was completely undefined. And then the UK went into paroxysms of deciding what leave meant, having voted in favour of leave. And if you want to lose a referendum on Irish unification, the best way to do that would be to have a referendum on principle on whether you stayed with the Union or whether you whether you move towards Irish unification without defining it. I think one consequence of the Brexit experience in the North is that people will not vote for an inadequately specified principle. And that's why it's vitally important, to my mind, that the government of the Republic develop a serious model and plan for a united Ireland.
Is there any split that you see? This is my last opinion polling question, but I'm really curious about how we understand these numbers. Do you see what kind of a generational picture emerges?
Not as strong as we expected. If you go for the internet-based polls, the young, and particularly young Catholics, are deeply enthusiastically in favour of unification, and they're deeply enthusiastically pro-Sinn Féin. If, however, you go for the broader surveys, the young don't look as different from the old as we might expect. So it'll be vitally important that much greater youth engagement takes place if unification is going to be successful.
Now, if there is, I guess I shouldn't say if, especially in this room, let's talk about the referendum and assume that there will be a referendum at some point in the future. What does that look like? How does it take place? how is it called? As much as I've read about this, that's still kind of an unclear question in my mind.
So the UK Secretary of State for Northern Ireland is obliged under international law in a solemnly binding treaty with the Irish government and on the basis of UK law to hold a referendum if, in his opinion, and it says his in the statute, he has formed the opinion that support for the Union is no longer what it used to be. I'm paraphrasing. In other words, the Secretary of State has to form a judgment that Irish unification will win in a referendum. So the question becomes, how does such a Secretary of State come to such a judgment? In my view, the easiest way to come to such a judgment is if political parties supporting Irish unification have won clear majorities, either in the Westminster elections or in the Northern Ireland Assembly elections, on a platform where they support the holding of a referendum. That's unequivocal. It makes it easy to show the objective evidence has occurred. Using survey or opinion poll data for making that judgment is much trickier for some of the reasons I've already given. And if you like, the choice is partially impossible because the Secretary of State has to predict not only that he thinks that opinion has changed and therefore there should be a referendum. In effect, he's predicting the outcome of a campaign. And no social scientist can tell you how to predict accurately how a campaign will go. But suffice it to say, if there is sufficient support in elections for a referendum to be held, the British are under a legal obligation to hold that referendum. So that would be step one. Mm-hmm. Step two, the South by this time should have prepared. Under the provisions of the Good Friday Agreement, the South must, in my view, we can debate this if you like, but the South, in my view, must hold a matching referendum. It does not have to be on the same day. It can be later, but it has to be on substantively the same question.
Now, why is that a debate?
Because the wording allows for two possibilities.
Right.
Concurrent can mean at exactly the same time, but concurrent can mean that two bodies make the same decision, but at different dates. Two houses of the US Congress make decisions concurrently. They need not make that decision on the same day.
But in this context, why does it matter?
Because the South may wish to have an interval before it asks its population to vote. And it may wish to judge the nature of the Northern referendum to see what particular issues have emerged that might potentially affect opinion in the South. So there are lots of strategic reasons why the South may think like this, one of which would be if it had, for example, a whole series of constitutional changes that would go into effect if there was support for unification. What's the point, perhaps, of putting the public through those changes if it's not necessary?
What kind of timing? I believe you've said 2030, but I think that now you're adjusting a bit, right? Is that accurate?
I believe that 2030 is the earliest date in which it would be feasible to win a referendum in the North. In my view, it would be very unwise to hold a referendum if unification is going to lose. That's demoralizing. We've seen cases of this in Quebec, in Canada. We've seen similar processes in other countries. If you are holding a referendum, you want to win it. And you want to have the timing appropriate, and you want to have the necessary planning in place. It is possible that the Secretary of State could call an early referendum in the hope that that way they'd keep the Union. Two things matter there. They could be taken to court if they don't have objective evidence that opinion has changed. The second thing that has to be borne in mind, the Good Friday Agreement was well drafted in this respect. If the referendum is lost, there can be another referendum 7 years later, provided the conditions are met. So it's not a one-off. It doesn't die if the first referendum fails. But in my view, it's much wiser to win the first referendum the first time, as I'm sure everybody here probably agrees.
Now, are you satisfied with the rate of preparations in Northern Ireland? First of all, let's talk about that.
One cannot expect the UK government nor Ulster Unionists to prepare for the referendum.
Correct.
They wanted to lose. They prefer it didn't happen at all. And it is, in my view, unreasonable of Irish nationalists to expect unionists to cooperate in the demise of their own political preference. They're rational, right? So what they will do is say, you plan as you wish, you pursue your own project, but don't expect us to facilitate you in doing what you intend to do. That places an obligation on all those who favour Irish unification to study Unionist and Protestant preferences very carefully, to do the maximum feasible to ensure that if there is a united Ireland, that they will feel fully, equally respected, as Mary Lou promised, and that their rights will be protected, and that the institutional arrangements will be ones with which they're satisfied.
Right. I guess what I was getting at is, do you feel that there's enough discussion going on? We see the parties, especially Sinn Féin, holding a lot of, conversations around Northern Ireland and also in the Republic, talking about what that would look like. Do you feel it's enough? We also see some academic work going on. Do you think it's moving fast enough that people will have the information that they need to have before, say, a 2030 at the earliest referendum?
I think things are sufficiently far away that the right kind of dialogue and discussion and thinking is beginning now. In my view, unification is so serious that the government of Ireland needs to have a ministry of reunification. If Korea can have a ministry of unification, why can't Ireland, South Korea? The North probably has one as well, but I haven't investigated that. It requires a standing constitutional forum in which changes would be contemplated to achieve Irish unification. A whole series of small citizens' assemblies should take place north and south to gather opinion on a whole range of questions. We've started some of this work. We have some interesting results. We don't think our results are definitive. We would like others to engage in the same. Above all, the Irish government needs to have a plan which it can think of articulating in a document that will go before the public, north and south, when a referendum is called. And that means they have to plan the constitutional design of Ireland. Will Northern Ireland persist in a united Ireland? What will the health service arrangements be like? What will the educational system be like? What are the expected tax consequences? What are the expected contingent preparations that the Irish government have engaged in to make the possible costs of unification absorbable, and so on?
But so far, I'm not aware of that sort of planning going on in the Republic of Ireland. What responsibilities do they have, and how are they managing them?
So the current coalition government has emphasised the Good Friday Agreement, and they've emphasised the Shared Island Initiative, which has promoted lots of useful cross-border infrastructure arrangements. I'm against none of that. That's absolutely appropriate. But I think, on top of that, it is not a contradiction with the Good Friday Agreement, and indeed it's part of responsible politics to prepare properly for the momentous consequences of unification. And I expect that's more likely to occur under a future Irish government than the current one.
Well, that's one of the things, right? I feel like we're having this discussion in the context of an expectation that there will be a change in the political leadership in Ireland after the next elections, right?
Yes, that's a widespread expectation. I think we have to be cautious. The two old parties are still doing fairly well in opinion polls. Mm-hmm. The Green Party might switch its alignment. The combination of Sinn Féin and a whole series of smaller parties on the left might form a new government. But what we do know is this: no party in Dáil Éireann is against Irish unification. Every single one of them supports Irish unification. So if there was a government led by parties that wanted to prepare, I don't think they would face any fundamental obstacles. So I do expect, even if the two more conservative parties led the next government, I think the impetus to deepen preparation is very strong, and I expect it to take place.
So how much do we know about the fears or the uncertainties? And I think we have to obviously take them separately. So let's say first within the Republic, and then after that within Northern Ireland, when people are thinking about the possibility, there are so many things that are not clear. You mentioned some of them. How do you integrate the education system? How do you integrate the health system? Will it be expensive for the country? Will we benefit financially or economically from the arrangement? What are people really focused on when they're talking about this? What can we infer from your research?
So we know that Southerners prefer unification by 6-1. That's decisive. We also know that Southerners expect unification to benefit the North more than the South, or for both the North and the South to benefit equally. By contrast, Unionists are despairing. They think that Irish unification is mutual ruin. Everybody will be worse off economically, which is what you'd expect them to argue. Northern Catholics are quite optimistic about the economics of Irish unification. When we move to questions like education, it's very clear that Southerners and Northerners share a joint aspiration to having secular education systems, North and South. That's wonderful. That's a century of progress already evident in surveys for public opinion. What's much more controversial is health. Northerners have a profound attachment to the ideal of the National Health Service. Healthcare free at the point of need, without direct payment. And many Northerners see the Southern system as one in which you have to pay out-of-pocket expenses, and they assume it's a more costly and less effective system. In fact, the objective evidence is that the Southern system, for all its flaws, is performing better than the Northern one. But if you look at Unionist opinion in particular, particularly hardline Unionist opinion, the thing that they really love most about the British state is the health service. So anybody preparing for Irish unification seriously needs to think about what will be the nature of the health system, North and South.
But is that still the case, do you think? Because I feel like every time I read news from Northern Ireland, there's an article about some aspect of the NIH failing, the NIH is collapsing, everybody is unhappy with the NIH in Northern Ireland now.
It's true that people can have both thoughts in their head at the same time. Yeah. They think that socialized medicine is good, and the system that we're having at the moment is lousy. Right? They can have both of those thoughts, and that's what they demonstrate in surveys and in what they say. So their immediate demand is for more funding to make the NHS work better.
Sorry, NHS, I said the NIH.
It's all right, it's okay.
It's my brain.
I didn't want to correct you on
the
abbreviation.
Yes, no, it's good. Anyway, go on.
So, given the state of Northern preferences, and given the fact that many in the South too would prefer that the Irish system evolved, it's called Sláinte Care, the Irish for Health, that many would like to see that evolve in a more socialized medicine direction. There's a possibility of convergence on preferred model. But that would require a lot of work in the South, and would require a lot of credibility to be persuasive to the Northern public.
Right. And what is the relative, you said that there is a shared desire for a secular education, but I would like to go back to that for 1 minute, because I read different accounts of the relative merit of the two education systems. How do you see benefit emerging from that? Who would gain from that?
In the 1960s, there was no question that Northern Ireland had better educational outcomes than the Republic of Ireland. That's one of the reasons my parents moved to the north. Now, today, the situation is transformed. The southern population is one of the best educated populations in Europe. Ireland used to export unskilled, uneducated labor. Now it exports skilled labor, skilled professionals. That's a transformation. And one of the reasons why the southern educational system is much better is it's comprehensive, it's focused on the middle range of abilities, and it's dramatically improved things. In the North, you have segregation by religion, you have segregation by gender, you have segregation by alleged IQ test. What's the consequence? The small number who go through the very good grammar schools in the North perform outstandingly well, but the bulk of the population don't get well served by the education system. So a convergence on something like the Southern model would, I think, be in everyone's benefit. But the final removal of the clergy from education is, I think, both better for education and better for the prospects of Irish unity.
I also
Come
feel
on,
like-
secular people. You should approve me.
I also feel like there's a lot of distrust. Particularly, I would say, I hear that among nationalists toward the British government, I guess naturally and historically. I know there has been this sort of, it's been floating around for a while, the idea that the referendum would need a supermajority. I think Steve Baker said that last year. At some point there was a DUP bill. And I believe that Leo Varadkar also said that at one point, right?
Yes, he's corrected himself, and he may well switch preferences again. So,
but it seems to me that creates, it sort of feeds into the sense that somehow this is still lodged, the decision is still somehow lodged with the British. And there is a kind of skepticism and very deep distrust that this is going to happen because somehow they will change the rules or move the goalposts at the last minute.
The Good Friday Agreement would not have happened if there had been a qualified majority requirement for Irish unification. The reason we have a Good Friday Agreement was in part because we have an agreement on how Irish unification can take place, majority consent in both jurisdictions. There's no good argument for having a qualified majority. All of those arguments were rejected at the time, and they should, in my view, be rejected today. That is not to say, however, that it would not be better if there was as much support as possible for Irish unification. And I think that's how generously one should interpret Varadkar's remarks. It's not how one should interpret Ian Paisley's remarks.
Right.
Now, if you did have a qualified majority, what's the consequence? The consequence would mean that Northern Ireland would remain in the United Kingdom because a minority wanted it to.
Right.
That would be fundamentally undemocratic, and it would be against everything that unionists and UK governments have said since 1920. If you can think of a formula more likely to return nationalists to violence, then I'd like to know what it is. So I don't think that this is going to change. And because it isn't going to change, we have to focus on the fact that you could have a referendum outcome with a relatively narrow victory, say a 52% victory in the North. That means you've got a significant level of the population that would be opposed to the outcome. That's why it would be vital that everything has been put in place to maximize their security, maximize their sense that although they've lost a referendum, they're not going to lose everything. So in my view, that involves all sorts of thinking through how do you protect and respect the British and Protestant identity in a united Ireland? How do you ensure unionists that even though they've lost, it's possible that they could have, for example, a continuing Northern Ireland Assembly, if they wanted it. That's available under the existing constitution. There's a whole series of things that could be done to make sure that they will feel full citizens. For example, how do you design the second chamber of the Irish state to give Protestants and British people distinct representation, those who identify as British? It's already the case that the Good Friday Agreement says you can be Irish or British or both in your identification, but also in your citizenship. If that's the case, can we create special arrangements for those who want to remain British citizens? That I think is the kind of generosity that should be relatively easy for the Irish to accomplish.
I guess it sounds a little bit, I somehow doubt that it will be quite that easy, because I feel
I didn't
like
say
right.
anything about it being easy.
But we're seeing, I mean, I wonder if there isn't a feeling among unionists, and we do see this population in Northern Ireland that stakes so much of their cultural identity and political identity on the idea of being British. And I have seen that they're already in a real tailspin, and have been, over Brexit and the different trade things that have had to go into place as a result. I wonder if there isn't a feeling that this process has already gotten started, that they have lost control of it already, and that they already have a kind of a paranoid, or I don't even know if paranoid is accurate, because I'm not sure that they're wrong, but perhaps a panicked is a better word, sense that the situation is already getting away from them.
I think even the mildest of unionists would say that paranoia and a sense of being besieged has been a permanent part of their culture since the 1880s. So there's nothing totally new about that.
Yeah.
But there is some interesting change. So across Great Britain and Northern Ireland, there is a de-Britification taking place. The number of people who identify as British, as opposed to English, Scottish, Northern Irish, is falling. And the meaning of what it is to be British in these different locations has changed. So to be British in England means to be pro-European, cosmopolitan, possibly of ethnic heritage from outside these islands. To be British in Scotland, to be British in Northern Ireland, and to be British in Wales is to be against the European Union, to be xenophobic, to be against immigrants, and to be fundamentally worried about your ethnic security. Who thinks like that in Northern Ireland? Those of a loyalist disposition. Mm-hmm. But a very large section of the Northern Ireland population now identifies as Northern Irish, not British, as their first preference. Now, that, to my mind, opens up a vista. If you have Irish and Northern Irish identities being prevalent across the two parts of the island over the long run, that's a much easier form of coexistence. Now, I'm not trying to deny the necessity and the moral correctness of protecting those who feel British in their identity and their citizenship. But they're a reducing section of the Northern Irish population.
And how about the UK? Let's talk about the British government. How are they looking at the situation? I always hear people say, I don't know if this is true because I have never really worked in the UK or in Great Britain or in England, I guess. I
That's
always
beautiful.
hear people.
The United Kingdom, Great Britain.
I know, I'm trying to think of like exactly the piece of land I'm actually referring to. But I always hear people say they don't even want Northern Ireland. They don't care about it. I don't know how true that is. I know that is the sort of stereotypical perception of it. What do you know about that?
So we know that during the high tide of debate about what Brexit should mean, that members of the Conservative Party were polled, and well over 60% of them thought it was more important to achieve a hard Brexit than to keep Scotland. And the same number thought the same about Northern Ireland. So that's the hardline conservative identity that is now emergent in the traditional governing party of the UK. More and more, I think the Conservatives represent an English nationalist movement rather than a pan-UK party of the Union. The world we're moving into now is a curious one in which the Labour Party is the party of the Union of Great Britain. Labour cares profoundly about keeping Scotland in the United Kingdom. It has not ever had the same historic ambition to keep Ireland in the Union. So we'll see. I think one of the problems of the UK is a diminution of serious enthusiasm for the Union. And Northern Ireland Protestants feel that, and they know that. They're not loved, they're not wanted. That's their sentiment.
Yeah, and Keir Starmer recently said that it's not even on the horizon, right?
He said that about Irish
about
unification.
the Irish unity, yeah.
Yes, I think what's happening there is straightforward. Labour is concerned about Scotland. Labour has never had, I think I'm correct in saying this, never had a majority government without having a strong level of support in Scotland to supplement whatever strength Labour gets in England. So Labour feels as a party that it needs Scotland in the Union, and it needs to do well in Scotland. And Labour, like the Conservatives, will be tempted to avoid giving Scottish nationalists a second referendum as long as possible. So that interferes in the Irish case, accepting that Northern Ireland can have a referendum, but refusing one to Scotland creates a problem, particularly if, as the law says, Northern Ireland can have one every 7 years, but Scotland, apparently, there's no law saying this, but Scotland can only have one every generation. What's a generation? Every 15 years, every 25 years, every 30 years? So this is an important problem now for the Labour Party, a distinct problem of government. And I think it will be part of successful Irish diplomacy, whoever leads the Irish government, to hold the British government to its international obligations under the Good Friday Agreement, preferably with the support of Irish America. And if that happens, then I think the two questions can be separated. But it's my suggestion that what Keir Starmer had in mind was Scotland, not Northern Ireland.
Right, well, that's also something you hear all the time, that they really are worried about Scotland and it's not even about Northern Ireland. Speaking of Labour, let's talk about legacy, something that I think I've been very interested in, and I think a lot of our audience probably has as well. We now see that they have passed the legacy bill. It's gone through royal assent, and it has been challenged by the Irish government. How does that, do you want to explain a little bit about what you think is relevant of that for the audience, and how does that play into this discussion, and how does that kind of get into this moment of talking about Irish unity?
So the Legacy Act achieved the remarkable accomplishment of being opposed by every single party in Northern Ireland. Every single human rights organisation, every single victims group, whether they be primarily Protestant, primarily Catholic, or neither. That was a remarkable level of accomplishment of the Conservative government. Why did they pursue it? They pursued it because of lobbying by veterans groups, by British Army generals, and probably, I can't verify this, by the intelligence chiefs who did not want past patterns of collusion between British agents and loyalist militia to become even more evident in the public domain. The Conservatives were warned that if they passed this legislation, it would violate the European Convention on Human Rights. And they were warned that the UK courts, particularly in Northern Ireland, would find that way. And that's just happened. Justice Colton of the Northern Ireland courts found that the Legacy Act is in contradiction of the right to life of the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, the UK government, if it was sensible, would respond to that by saying, okay, let's abandon the Act, or let's radically amend it. Instead, it's going to appeal, and it will then appeal it to the UK Supreme Court. That'll take a lot of time. We're familiar with people dragging out court cases in the United States. So, in consequence, this will be a decision for what I expect to be a Labour government in the UK. Keir Starmer has already committed himself to repealing the Act. So has Hilary Benn, the Shadow Secretary of State. I expect Irish America will hold him to his word on that respect. What's the significance? The general significance is we're now maybe speaking very loosely. We're 30 years from really sustained conflict. We're moving into generations who only know about the conflict through YouTube videos and whatever they hear from their parents. It would have been so much better if there had been agreement on how to handle the legacy questions, the mutual responsibility for conflict and violence, and the collective determination to only have a peaceful way forward. Through their own selfish strategic interests, the British have, however, created a common Irish objection to the Legacy Act. Whether that will spill over for long-run consequences, as I sincerely hope, I cannot know.
Well, I just realized we're almost completely out of time, but I wanted to ask you, just as a final question, if your vision of where things are headed is correct, how do you think historians will remember this particular period of time in the history of the Irish island? Where are we?
I think they'll see it as an interregnum between the making of the Good Friday Agreement and Irish unification. And they'll look back and they'll ask themselves, how did the Conservatives and the Democratic Unionist Party conspire to make it much easier for champions of Irish unification?
Thank you, Professor and Megan. It was very informative. So before we get to our next big panel, we're going to bring up another one of the sponsoring organizations. But I just want to remind everyone, when we get to the next panel discussion, we're hoping to get questions from the audience. This is going to be about voices from Ireland, but we want to hear from you as well, and we'll ask the questions of the panel. So if you haven't, raise your hand. You see a volunteer walking around, they'll give you a card, and you can fill out your questions. Yes. Is she ready? Okay. So our next speaker, as I said, is one of the sponsoring organizations here. Marilyn Madigan is the president of the Ladies Ancient Order of Hibernians. So if you could, please put your hands together.
I am privileged and honored to address you today as the National President of the Ladies Ancient Order of Hibernians. The Ladies Ancient Order of Hibernians is the largest Irish women's organization in the United States. For the past 130 years, we have been committed to Ireland and Irish causes. In our preamble to our Constitution, we state the same as the AOH. One of our purposes is to aid and advance by all legitimate means the aspirations and endeavors of the Irish people to achieve complete and absolute independence. Today's event is a very historic time in the history of Irish America as we gather at this Irish Unity Summit. We will hear about how we can be part of a journey to a new and united Ireland. There have been conversations all over the island of Ireland about Irish unity. Now it's our time to be part of that conversation. Last year, the Ladies Ancient Order of Hibernians, to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, we had a publication, Trasna Natona, Across the Waves, the Women's Reflections on the Good Friday Agreement. This publication highlighted the women advocates on both sides of the Atlantic who helped make the Good Friday Agreement possible through their commitment to peace and justice. Today's event will bring many of these women again together to be advocates for Irish unity. The leadership of the Ladies Ancient Order of Hibernians has spoken up over the last century for the important goal of a united Ireland. Our early leaders spoke before a congressional committee on the Irish question before they even had the right to vote. Today, our members continue to speak up. I would like to quote our early leaders, and as the current president, echo their words. Our president, Ellen Ryan Jolly, stated at that congressional meeting, "We are here in liberty's name. We are here to ask the Congress of the United States to pass a resolution whose purpose is to permit Ireland, the oldest of the nations, to light the torch of Irish national independence, today's Irish unity. The Good Friday Agreement, over 100 years after Jolly spoke at that congressional committee, provides what she stated. The resolutions before you provide that self-determination shall be given to the people of Ireland, that they shall finally and for all time decide for themselves the system of government under which they shall live. The widespread conviction in America was that the doctrine of self-determination should be applied to the settlement of the Irish question. Now, the question of Irish unity. Another president, Del Christie, said, "We ask, Mr. Chairman, only for a free Ireland. We ask that in conjunction with all the other small nations, Ireland may be allowed to work out her own developments, to look after her own interest, and to be governed and directed by the government of her own people." That is what we are asking for today, that the people of Ireland, both North and South, decide what they want as a new and united Ireland. We will take away from this Irish Unity Summit many ideas how we as individuals and members of our organizations can take the next steps to make Irish unity a reality, if that is what the wishes are after the referendum. In conclusion, I echo the words of our early leaders. The dreams of Hibernians of early days may be realized. They dreamed and hoped for an independent Ireland. We shall never hope for less. By unity, friendship, and Christian charity, we may win that which to the faint-hearted may seem impossible. The privilege one day of celebrating, and very soon, a St. Patrick's Day upon the holy soil of an independent and united Ireland. Thank you.
All right. If we could start getting people back into the room so we can bring our next panel in, please. Some of the volunteers, could you tell people to start coming back, please? Thank you. New York Cayley Band, thank you again. All right, for those of you that are still out in the hall, please make your way in and do so quietly. Find your seats. We have a very diverse panel coming to this stage next. The title of the program is going to be Hopes for a New Ireland with Voices from Ireland. So if you could put your hands together and welcome the moderator for this panel discussion, the very esteemed Professor Christine Keneally from Quinnipiac University.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. This sounds like one of my classes.
Your mic's not on. Let's see. Let's check. Check. Yeah, you're on.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Oh. No. Oh, no, try now.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. You're all very welcome. I'm delighted to be hosting this panel, moderating it, and I'm really delighted because this is the hall where my hero, Frederick Douglass, spoke in 1863. So, very historic. If you don't know me, I am a historian of 19th century Ireland. My particular focus is the Great Hunger and abolition, with special reference to Frederick Douglass. On a personal level, I have two children. My daughter was born in Dublin, and my son was born in Belfast. So they are my personal contribution to Irish unity. So I'm just going to start off with two dates. I'm a historian, I do love dates. Two dates. 1801, the United Kingdom came into existence, and it came as a result of the 1798 Rising. It was a panic response to a nationalist rising. The other date, 1921, when Ireland was partitioned. And again, it was a panic response to a nationalist rising in 1916. And we are now living with both of those events, both the United Kingdom and partition, and I would suggest they are both failed political entities. But how do we move on from that? And so I have a very distinguished, a very diverse panel. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves and to explain what circumstances brought them here. And I'm going to start with Glenn.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Great. It's Misha Glenn O'Brien. I am Glenn Bradley. Today, I am the chair of Veterans for Peace Ireland, and I'm also on the board of the Belfast Charitable Society. However, my life began in 1967 when I was born in West Belfast. Loyalist West Belfast, a loyal Irish area. What do I mean by loyal Irish? Well, I meant that while we were Irish, we looked eastwards for our sovereignty. We looked to Britain. Where some people grew up listening to Cayley music, I grew up listening to the Blood and Thunder, the Shankill Protestant Boys. I was born into a working class home, a 2-up, 2-down terraced house. No running hot water, utter poverty. My bath was a tin thing that hung in the yard wall and was brought in on a Friday night whenever we would be dipped like sheep. As we have often talked, and we do talk about partition, and we talk